back in time.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corn Productions. My co-host Stacie here to talk about The Holdovers. This is the continuation of Christmas month.
Yeah, happy December.
Yes,
Merry
exciting.
Christmas, happy holidays. All month long, we are talking about some great holiday films, both classics and modern. This is one of the modern ones, Holdovers, which just released in 2023.
Yep, and the movie's description reads as follows. A cranky instructor at a New England school remains on a campus during Christmas break. He soon forms an unlikely bond with a brainy but damaged troublemaker, and with the school's cook, a woman who just lost her son in the Vietnam War. Now, that's not actually what the movie's description reads as, because there's a word here that
you can't
I can't seem to pronounce. And we found that out the first time we recorded this, or tried to, and unfortunately realized that we did not record anything. Thankfully, we didn't get very far with that. But
We got far enough that I was on page 3 of my notes.
Yes. So, anyway.
Well, the first 2 pages are people.
Right.
So yeah, hi.
Hi, yes.
Let's start over.
All right.
The Holdovers.
So yeah, the movie was written by David Hemmingson, and the movie was directed by Alexander Payne, who I am a fan of. He has 15 directorial stints for him, including Sideways, Election, which I considered covering for Election Day, which already happened, as you pointed out in the last time we recorded this, and Descents. And of course, he also did About Schmidt, which is a movie with Jack Nicholson and Kathy Bates that I'm less a fan of, but I still enjoy it. Before going any further, I'll tell you a couple of things. One, this is not a spoiler-free podcast. If you haven't watched the episode or the movie, I would highly recommend you check it out and then come back and give us a listen. Secondly, if you're listening on one of the platforms that this podcast is now available on, please follow and feel free to check out our YouTube channel, Corn Productions, where additional content can be discovered. If you're already on my YouTube channel, please like, share, and comment, and subscribe to our channel. All right, so Stacie, once again, your thoughts on this movie.
All right. So I hadn't seen this movie before. You had seen it.
Yes,
you enjoyed
I actually saw it in the theater.
Somebody in one of our online people suggested this film, and you thought that was a great idea, and I agreed to do it without having seen it yet. So I watched it for the first time this week, and then watched it again to take the notes. A lot of notes. This is a very long movie.
Yes, it's a great movie. It was a pain in the butt to take notes on.
So this film's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I do have 12 pages of notes, which is significantly more than I usually have.
Right, yeah. At
so
least by 5 pages.
There's a lot of people in this, and one thing that we do here is I like to talk about all of the actors, and as well as any background performers that we have information on, which we do have some of that in this movie. So as we go through, I will be making sure we cover every actor. Even if they only had one line, we're going to tell you who they were, because that's what we like to do here, is to give a shout out to all of our performers.
Right. All right. So do we have anything else to say before diving in?
Well, I said it all already, but what did I say?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So one thing I really love is the aesthetic of this film.
Right.
So the movie takes place in 1970. Even though it was filmed in 2023, it was filmed digitally. They made it look like it was done on film.
Right.
With post-production. And it's really beautifully done. The setting is great. I love the props and the costumes and like all of the little details that they included in this film.
Yeah, they even went as far as to include dirt smudges in the film digitally after the fact. So yeah, they went all out and tried to make this look like a very 1970s film, up into how they did the credits for this film.
Yeah, and if you look, like, just look at any scene, there's so many little teeny tiny details and so much like great period authentic things that, like, we cover a lot of things that take place in different time periods, and they never have the amount of details that I saw
absolutely.
in this film.
Mm-hmm.
There were very few moments that kind of took me out of it. And for the most part, I would have believed this film was made 30, 40 years ago.
You did mention prior that when we were recording previously...
when we were not recording previously.
that there were people who did complain about certain aspects of
yeah, there were a couple little nitpicky things that I found people say. But for the most part, like, it's very well done. The establishing of the period that we're in, I found it to be very impressive.
All right, so when the film begins, we are at a choir class singing over wintry images. I'm assuming this is the surrounding area, the school.
Yeah, so we see the school.
Yeah.
This is Barton Boarding School. We're in Massachusetts, a quaint New England school. It's very snowy. And the first actor that we meet is the choir leader, played by Peter Krasinski. And this is his only acting credit because he is actually a conductor and a high school music teacher.
Which is pretty cool.
So they just brought in a music person to run the music. That's one great thing about this film is it feels very authentic because they have a lot of that where they're bringing in actual people to do these roles and not necessarily actors. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that every single scene in this movie is filmed on practical locations. There's not one soundstage. Mm-hmm. Not a single scene is done on a soundstage. Every single one of them is in an actual building.
Oh, okay.
Which is super cool and unique.
Right, yeah.
Like, usually you get some of that, but every single scene. They filmed at several actual high schools, to get the different rooms and things that they needed. And they filmed at actual restaurants, and they filmed at an actual movie theater, and none of it's sets. Not any of it is just a set, which is super cool.
All right, so we...
Sorry. One of the choir members is one of our Holdovers students.
Yeah.
The character of Alex Allerman, he's one of the younger Holdovers. He's played by Ian Dolly. He only has 2 credits, this film and the movie Spirited.
Which is a movie that was suggested to us.
Yeah, that was another one that was suggested we cover. Don't think we're going to get to that one, but maybe next year.
Yep, maybe.
There's only so many movies we can cover in a month. And then one of the uncredited listings that we have for one of these choir members is played by Tommy Serpitsky.
Okay, so the kids are running around the area of the school. We see a house nearby the campus. Eventually, we get introduced to a Professor Paul Hunman, played by...
Hunham.
Okay.
I just call him Paul throughout my notes because I couldn't handle Hunham.
Well, my note says human, which is interesting. I knew that was not correct.
Yeah, so I just called him Paul throughout the whole film.
And he's played by Paul Giamatti. 120 credits for him, including Sideways, Man on the Moon, and The Truman Show. All great films, by the way. And plenty of other stuff.
Yeah, he played Santa in the movie Fred Claus.
Which is funny because there's a Santa joke
in this movie. He also played John Adams in the 2008 John Adams series, as well as reprising that role in Ken Burns' Ben Franklin series, which my husband made me watch because he loves Ben Franklin.
So did you happen to enjoy that film as well?
No.
No, you didn't enjoy that?
I'm not as big on documentary as my husband.
Okay, so he's writing out some tests. He's correcting some tests.
He's correcting the final exams.
Which is not something I knew originally.
The final exams from his class. So he teaches ancient civilizations, and he's got the little blue text booklets, and he is covering them in red marker. Very profound marker strokes happening. The kids did not do well.
I don't think I would.
We're soon going to find out exactly how poorly they did.
He's interrupted by Miss Lydia Crane, played by Carrie Preston. 78 credits for her, including 2 episodes of Dr. Death, which is an interesting series. She's in season 2. I didn't actually see that season yet, but I did see season 1. It's kind of an anthology series following a different doctor every time. And she's also a regular on True Blood, as well as an episode of Lost.
And she is she's in a current series called Elsbeth. She's the lead title character in that show. She was in a horror movie called They Them, as well as 3 episodes of The Following, both of which feature Kevin Bacon.
So is the They Them horror movie following along with a monster that is confused about their gender identity?
It's a camp of LGBTQ students.
Gotcha, okay.
Where the massacre takes place.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting.
It was not a good movie.
No?
I wanted it to be. It wasn't.
Was it bad because it was against that community? Or?
No, it was just a badly produced movie.
Badly produced movie, okay.
But yeah, so Kevin Bacon being in both of those things with her, we now have our 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon covered.
Yes.
Covered for this because of Carrie Preston.
A game we already played in Halloween month.
What?
That's a game we already played in Halloween month.
Yes, we did.
Well.
Yes, we did. So when it's 1 degree and obvious to us, we can mention it.
Yes.
Although I didn't find any degrees to Reed Price in this one.
No.
But that's our more typical game around here. Is the 5 degrees of Reed Price. We also very briefly saw the character of Danny. He hasn't spoken yet, but Danny's the school custodian.
Yeah, it's funny. We see him in for 2 seconds.
He's shoveling the snow outside of whatever building this is that Paul is in.
And then we won't see him again for a while.
He doesn't pop up again until a third of the way through the film, which is very strange. Or maybe is it 2/3? It was right at one of those, because I watched this in thirds when I was taking my notes. It's right at one of those cuts. But Danny's played by Naheem Garcia, who is also in the movie Spirited.
Yes.
He was in Hocus Pocus 2 and 2 episodes of Kevin Can F Himself, which is a show that Raymond Lee appeared
right,
in.
yes.
Raymond Lee being the lead of the 2022 Quantum Leap series that we have covered.
Yeah, we covered it quite extensively. So he's being summoned to speak to the boss, and he's kind of rude to her, but you have a different take on that.
Yeah, so Lydia Crane talking to Paul. Okay, so throughout the movie, we're going to get the idea he likes her.
Yeah.
Right? He's got a thing for her. In this moment, I didn't pick up on that necessarily, but I felt like she's kind of flirting with him. She brought him cookies, and she made it clear that she didn't bring everybody cookies.
Right, yeah. I wish she could bring me some of those
She
cookies.
sees something in him that maybe he doesn't see in himself.
And at this point, neither do we.
Nobody else sees in him, right?
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't just dismiss him as being this grumpy old man like it seems like everybody else is doing.
Yep.
So I can tell, like, they have some kind of a relationship that she's bringing him cookies, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, he's a little rough around the edges. But I don't think he's necessarily being rude to her. I think that's just who he is. He's rough around the edges, and he doesn't maybe know how to talk to a girl.
Perhaps not. I mean, not that I'm any better. I mean, I'm nice to women at least. But anyway, we see the kids packing to leave for the holidays, including Angus Tully, played by Dominic Sessa in his very first movie role.
This is Dominic's very first film acting credit, or film or television. He hasn't been in anything prior. It does look like he has a couple of projects in the work, so that's awesome for him.
He definitely deserves it.
Now, the history with Dominic is he actually graduated from a Massachusetts school called Deerfield Academy in 2022. And several of the scenes in this film were actually shot at Deerfield Academy, as well as some other high schools. Again, they used multiple schools to get all of the little rooms that they wanted for this. But several of them were shot at Deerfield, so that had to have been pretty interesting for him.
It's pretty nifty, and I would imagine pretty odd for him.
To be like, oh, well, here's my school, and let's film a movie here in my first acting role.
Right. Yeah.
He's kind of playing himself.
And I
mean, I don't know how much he's like Tully, but like himself as far as like, yeah, I'm a student. Here I'm a student. Got it covered.
You would never know this was his first role because he's excellent.
He does amazing. And so he was actually cast through his high school drama department is how all of this happened. The people making this film reached out to the local high school drama departments trying to fill the role because they didn't want a experienced actor. They wanted somebody fresh and that more conveyed like a high school student. And they got it.
Yeah, it very, very much feels authentic. So the kids are giving each other crap, including someone that we meet here.
Toothbrushing student is how he is credited, although Tully calls him by the name Crandall. He's credited as toothbrushing student, played by Cole Tristan Murphy. He is also in one episode of Kevin Can F Himself, and he's in an episode of SVU. And he gives Tully some crap and says that Tully's packing women's underwear in his suitcase, but Tully tells us it's actually a swimsuit, the very same swimsuit that James Bond wears on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
And I might as well make this joke again. You really did your homework this week.
And Tully is going to St. Kitts over break. He's very excited about his vacation, and is kind of pretty rude to these other kids.
You get the sense that this relationship between these kids is not good.
Nobody's friends with Tully.
Nope.
From what we're seeing. Everybody knows him, but nobody seems to like him.
Which is exactly kind of how people feel about Paul's character.
Exactly. Yeah, great insight early on, because we're going to get a whole lot more of that as we go.
Yes.
Then we meet another one of the Holdovers. That's going to be one of the kids we spend a little bit more time with, and that is Teddy Kuntz.
Yeah, he's played by Brady Hepner. 8 credits for him, including an appearance on Chicago Fire and The Black Phone.
And so Kuntz comes and accuses Tully of stealing his cigarettes to trade for a skin mag. And they're arguing. When we meet Weed Buyer Harriman, interesting credit there. Weed Buyer Harriman is played by Carter Shimp, who is in an episode of Fargo and an episode of One Chicago Med. And I don't feel like I said that before, so I think I skipped over that last time.
Well, now you made up for it.
So Weed Buyer Harriman is complaining to Kuntz about the quality and quantity of a product that he purchased from him. Tully just teases Kuntz because Kuntz is scheduled to hold over. while Tully's on his way to this great vacation. He teases him and calls him a poor Christmas orphan who doesn't have anywhere to go. So he just has to stay here with his pot and porn.
Based on how he's acting in these early scenes, it's not hard to kind of feel like this is what happens to him is kind of a little bit of karma.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we cut to the kitchen where we meet Mary Lamb, played by Divine Joy Randolph. 43 credits for her, including Only Murders Left in the Building, 9 episodes of that, which means that you should know her.
Yeah, so Only Murders in the Building.
What did I just say?
Something else.
Okay.
She played a detective in that show.
Okay.
She's also in 3 episodes of This Is Us.
Yes.
Which is important to the channel.
Yep.
Including the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking before, but it wasn't recorded. I think that she potentially is one of the people in Toby and Kate's support group.
Yeah, that would make sense.
That would make sense of who she played in that film.
She was also in Puss in Boots? Puss in Boots.
Puss.
So that would be 101 times that you've had to tell me that. The Last Wish, which was a surprisingly great movie. And she was also in Office Christmas Party, which is interesting. I was wondering if we should check that one out and perhaps cover it.
Perhaps.
But, yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
We've got a very long catalog of things we want to talk about here.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
She actually got her histories in theater.
Mm-hmm.
And she was Tony nominated for her performance in Ghost the Musical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So we cut to the dining hall where Mr. Endicott is discussing how he got out of staying behind with the students who aren't leaving. That will result in Paul being forced to do it. He's played by Bill Moodis. He was also in Don't Look Up. 32 credits, including 2 episodes of Castle Rock, and the 2019 version of Little Women, which is significant to me because I was actually in that play back in high school.
And the teacher that he is having this conversation with is Mr. Rosenweig, played by Dustin Tucker, who is in 4 episodes of Dexter New Blood, which is actually filmed in the very same little town that the townie scenes in this film are scenes in. Like where the tavern is at in that neighborhood. And let's see, we did pass by this. One of the kitchen staff uncredited roles is played by Michelle Egerton, who is also in 2 episodes of Castle Rock.
Oh, cool.
We get something that we start noticing, right? And noticing more as we cover a lot of TV shows. For us particularly, we talk about things filmed in Nova Scotia, so we learn all the things filmed there. And when you dive into credits like this, it becomes obvious what shows were filmed in the same place. Because you'll see the same shows popping up over and over and over again in different people's filmography. Specifically, like the smaller roles, right? The under 5 people that are just coming in, they're local to the filming. There's several titles that keep popping up. And I'm like, oh, those must have all been filmed right here in Massachusetts where this movie was filmed.
Right. So we got to Paul, who's getting the bad news from his boss, played by Andrew Garman. 29 credits for him, including a couple episodes of different series of Law and Order as different characters.
Yeah, he was in an episode of SVU, 1 episode of Criminal Intent, 1 episode of regular Law and Order, all as 3 different characters. And his character here is Dr. Hardy Woodrup, and I think we determined he's the headmaster of the school.
Yes, he's the Dumbledore of the school, though no magic is involved.
So he is telling us the history here a little bit. What happened is there was a student who is the son of a senator, and Paul failed this student in his H and Civ class because the student deserved to fail.
Right.
But because the senator is a big donor for the school, the headmaster did not want to fail the student, begged Paul to give him a C-, and he refused to do it because he has more integrity in that, and he's not going to lie, and he doesn't care how much money this family gave the school. That kid didn't pass the test, the class.
Right. So basically what's happening here is, he's thanking Paul for
volunteering.
But he's really not.
He's not volunteering.
Being punished.
He's being forced to do this. He doesn't want to do this. He's being punished, that he's going to have to stay with the Holdovers. We also learn that Woodrup was once upon a time a student of Paul.
Yes.
So Paul is the senior here. They have history, and they're in completely reverse roles now where he's the boss. And we can tell right off the bat they do not have a great relationship.
No. He considers Paul's approach to the students to be old school and in need of change. The headmaster ends up giving him the keys, in instructions and says his only task is to ensure the boy's safety. He begs Paul to be a human being because it's Christmas.
Yeah, so, and we also learn there are 4 total students scheduled to hold over, which we'll soon meet them. And this scene really gives me summer school vibes.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
the film Summer School with Mark Harmon. I love that movie. And obviously it's a very different setting than our Christmas movie, but...
Mark Harmon is a fun actor.
It's got a very similar setup
Yeah.
where he's a gym teacher and he's kind of forced to stay behind and teach summer school after the guy who was supposed to teach summer school skips out of town and goes and does something else for his vacation.
What's funny is you brought this movie up once before. I don't remember when or in what podcast, but we definitely talked about this before. So it's definitely something that you said you wanted to cover.
I would love to cover
Yeah.
that movie next summer if we continue covering movies, which I think we will because this is fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do something a little different than our series that we talk about.
So we cut to the class. Paul is handing out exams.
Oh, and I'll back up again, because again, you skipped this whole scene that happens before he gets there, which is really establishing the fact that the students hate Paul.
Right.
That's the big deal here, is they're talking about him. They're talking all sorts of crap about their teacher, and, of course, crap about the fact that they're in school at all today. And I think this is right about where we stopped talking and realized we weren't recording.
Yeah, so from now on, we'll be
We'll be
having
a
new
little more
conversations.
fresh. Okay, so... they're talking about Paul and where might he be, and Kuntz. We talked about Kuntz already, right? Did we
Yes,
meet him?
we did. Yep.
Okay, so he suggests that Paul's off doing something inappropriate with the Cobb salad,
Yeah, yes.
and so that we have a character who is credited as Cobb salad student, and we do meet him again at the end of the film, but this is where he gets that name from. He's played by Will Sussbauer. This is his only credit.
You know, I would love to interview the guy who did these credits specifically for this movie.
Yeah, the credits are interesting, but I do appreciate it as someone who had to take notes on it. And I don't know if I already said that now or if I said that the last time we were not recording. As taking notes on these people, it's very helpful when the credits lend themselves to telling me who they actually are. But it does seem strange, and I feel bad for some of these actors. Like, here's my only credit. I'm Cobb salad student.
Well, this is a relatively new film, so I'm assuming that these guys are going to get better credits as they go along.
Yeah, it just seems weird how some of them are credited, especially the ones who actually have a name in the script.
Right.
But the name didn't make it to the credits. So anyways, Cobb salad student objects because he eats the Cobb salad and wants to know why Kuntz went there so fast.
Right.
Like, do you know something? Should I be worried? And that's when Paul finally arrives. He is late because he was with the headmaster and passes out those final exams that he was grading at the beginning.
And, most of them did rather poorly.
So the grades range from a C+ to an F-.
Except for Angus.
Except for Tully, who receives the best grade in the class, which was a B+.
So they all moan about it to the point where he ends up offering them a makeup test, but with new material, and it's going to happen after the break.
Right, so he says, let's open our books to Chapter 6, new material. We're going to learn it now, and when you come back from break, we'll do a retest.
So he begins to teach, but Angus argues against this, having a class with new material, and he gets the makeup test rescinded, and if displeased, they can all take it up with Angus.
Yeah, and they still have to learn Chapter 6 over break on their own now, because they don't want him to teach it.
So his relationship with the other students is already not good. I think that's a good description. Not good.
Nobody's relationship with anybody is good right now.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't get along with everybody.
So this doesn't help. For the record.
This doesn't help. Now remember, he already has the best grade. He passed. He doesn't care about a makeup exam.
Right, yeah.
All the other kids need that makeup exam.
So yeah, the makeup test is going to be an average of the two tests.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what he was explaining before. And that's not going to benefit Tully at all unless he gets like an A- or something along those lines.
Right.
So it's for him, it's actually more like he'd probably more likely be losing in that situation. So yeah, like you said, this does not benefit him whatsoever. And then we cut to like some kind of funeral, I think.
It's not they're having a chapel service.
Okay.
So this is part of their regularly scheduled school thing. And they mentioned this during the class scene, like, we have chapel in 40 minutes and then we're leaving. So this is regular. It's a private school. They go to chapel regularly.
See, I thought this was specifically for Curtis Lamb.
No, they're memorializing him at this service.
Gotcha.
But they're here to celebrate Christmas. The families are all here joining in on chapel, so it's like the regular chapel service, plus all the families are here, and they're sending the kids off and saying Merry Christmas and ending the semester. That's what they're doing.
Gotcha.
But yes, we do see this memorial, and it's referenced to Curtis Lamb, and this is Mary's son. He's from the class of 1969, so he graduated just a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we see his, he was born in 1951, died in 1970, so he died this year. He's 19 years old when he died in the Vietnam War.
Yes, he was killed in action, and he is the son of Mary, who we briefly saw at the beginning of this movie.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of our three main characters. Now, giving the sermon is, this actor is credited as priest/bartender.
Interesting.
And I was at first thinking, because, I watched the movie once, and then I did the notes. So at that point, I'm thinking, oh, he must be a bartender at the tavern.
Right.
Right? Picking up a job just like the teacher does. But no, he's actually a bartender in Boston, which has to be a totally separate character. Like, it's not that the priest is here bartending.
Okay, gotcha.
He's playing two totally separate characters, which is weird.
That is a weird
They
thing.
brought in like 100 actors to play all these one-line parts, but they reused this guy for this.
That's funny. They don't usually do that.
They don't. Yeah, it was a little weird. And the actor is Alexander Cook. He was also in 2 episodes of Kevin Can F Himself, and he was a zombie in the original 1978 Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, okay.
As well as a bunch of other stuff, but I thought that one was interesting.
Now, you watch Kevin Can F Himself, right?
I watched the first season. I never got around to the second season.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I remembered you saying that.
Did you have
at
a
some
particular
point.
question about it?
No, I was just kind of curious if you recognize any of these people from that show.
No.
No?
I mean, I recognize
Raymond
Lee.
Right.
But no, these like 1 and 2 episode peoples, I did not watch it that good enough to recognize them.
All right. So,
But yeah, so he gives a sermon, and we have a conversation between Paul and Endicott. He's apologizing about his mother, because Endicott's lie was that his mom is sick, and that's why he can't do it. And Endicott's like, well, what about my mom? Like, oh, yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
no lie.
she's sick.
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
thanks. And we see Mary sitting in the front row since her son is being remembered here. And then school is let out.
Yep.
All of the kids start tramping off with their families and leaving, and school is out. And Tully's kind of standing on the porch because he doesn't see his family, and he's getting a little concerned.
So he ends up getting told that he has a phone call.
Yeah, by office lady. And I'm a little confused why this wasn't Miss Crane that came out, because I get that she's the secretary of the headmaster.
Right.
Every time we've met her, it's because the headmaster wants something. But this is a different office lady, apparently. Her name's just Office Lady. She's played by Liz Bishop, who's also in 1 episode of Kevin Can F Himself.
Cool stuff. The phone call happens to be his mother informing him that he's stuck there because his mom is going on a honeymoon.
Yeah, so Mom got married in July. She's
Yeah.
been married for 6 months. Remarried. But she said they haven't had enough time alone together, so they're going to go to St. Kitts by themselves. They don't want Tully there.
Right. And as you can imagine, he does not take
He's
this very
pretty
well.
upset. Not only is
Yeah.
he not going on vacation, but it's Christmas.
Right.
His mom doesn't want to see him. And he tells her, you promised me that on the way we could go to Boston and spend some time in Boston. And that's not going to happen now. And that's what he's really upset about. And of course, at this point, we don't know why he's upset about Boston, but we will.
Yes.
And she's pretty much like, oh, it's fine. I'll see you in the summer. Like, that's only 6 months away.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to see your son. And I can imagine that's
Kinda
horrifying
painful
for
and-
him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad enough you're a kid and you're at boarding school and you only get to, be home on breaks, like, with your family. And now,
Right.
like, your mom doesn't want to see you at Christmas.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that's
pretty
ridiculous.
rough. So he
And the mom is played, the mom's character is Judy Klotfelder. That's her new last name. She's played by Jillian Vigman. She's in all 50 episodes of Lower Decks.
I was going to say, that name sounds really familiar.
Have you watched Lower Decks?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so she's
Yeah.
in that. I don't know on what capacity. She's in 5 episodes of Roswell, New Mexico. That's the remake show.
Not the old one.
Not the original, right? And she is she's in the movie The Hangover as well as all of its sequels. She's one of the spouses, I think.
Gotcha. So, Angus ends up joining Paul, who's explained that the stuck kids will be observing a normal class schedule, so he's not taking his boss's advice to act human. The kids are Jason, Teddy, and Yi Jun Park. Jason is played by Michael Provost, who was in the newest Quantum Leap.
Yes.
The second season episode, Some Kind of Magic, which is
A Kind of Magic,
which is on a lot of people's lowest episode list.
It wasn't a great episode, but I liked it. It was fun. It was a fun episode.
Well, it's funny because it was high on Carla's list, so there's that.
He played William Bloodborne, which was the love interest for Ben's character.
He was the one that... Was he the one that died in the...
Right,
yeah,
in the
okay.
original history. He was supposed to die, and Ben saved him, and that's him. And again, his character here is Jason Smith, one of the holdovers. The other holdovers are Kuntz, who we already met, Alex Alderman, who I already talked about, and Park. Park is played by Jim Kaplan, who doesn't have really any acting credits. He's a Broadway actor, though.
He has 5 credits for him. He also directed a short called Clara is Awake.
Okay.
And he also wrote and edited that.
Oh,
yeah.
That's pretty impressive because he looks very young.
He is pretty young.
Yeah. So he has a history in Broadway. He's also a classically trained violinist.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Impressive
young man.
Indeed.
So, these kids are getting to know each other. Tully joins them. Him and Paul don't look very happy about this revelation. And he's going over their schedule, like, you're going to do regular study sessions, you're going to exercise, and they complain that, they're not allowed to use the gym because it's a brand new gym, the floor's hasn't been finished yet, they're not allowed to step on it. And he's like, oh, no, we can exercise outside. But it's snowing and freezing, they don't want to exercise outside, but they're going to.
Yep.
And the kids are complaining, obviously, like, they don't want any part of any of this.
Right.
Like, we're supposed to be on vacation.
They're pretty much bad-mouthing Paul as they head outside. And then we cut to Paul and Mary. They talk. They are
Ooh, you skip so much, Dave. You skip so much.
Yeah.
This is why I have 12 pages of notes, and you only have 7.
Yes.
Because we met a couple of one-off characters here.
Okay.
So I don't want to skip the scene too much. And this is that scene of them walking. Now, they're getting to know each other during that scene. Because most of these kids don't know each other. They stop for a smoke break. We learn, like, the kids' situation. So, Smith, he's a football player. He's supposed to be skiing with his family. And the reason he's not is because he refused to cut his hair. His dad said, you got to cut your hair if you want to go on vacation with us. And he was like, nah, I'm going to leave my hair long. That's why he's being held over.
Okay.
And Park's here because his family's in Korea. They think that's too far for him to travel alone. That's why he's here. His family loves him, but they're just really far away. Alderman is a Latter-day Saints kid. And his parents are on mission in Paraguay. So he's got a family that loves him too and are just really far away.
Right.
So they're not abandoned necessarily the way the older kids are. They're the two
Unlike
younger
Tully.
ones. And let's see, Kuntz, I don't think they actually talk about it here. But we do learn that at some point that the reason he's being held, he's a holdover is because his family's remodeling the house and they have stuff in his bedroom, so he can't come home.
Right.
Which is pretty ridiculous.
Yes. And I think Tully ends up calling him on that.
Yeah, so
too.
all the 3 older kids, that's Tully, Jason Smith, and Kuntz, are all ridiculously entitled kids whose families don't care about them.
Right. Yep.
But anyways, as they're standing outside and they're smoking and getting to know each other, because most of them don't know each other already, other than Tully and Kuntz, who we know have class together. These 2 guys take the school's Christmas tree and are carrying it away. Now, these 5 kids are spending Christmas here, and the school took down their Christmas tree.
So, not only do the parents not care about them, but the school that they're stuck at doesn't care about them either.
Then they got stuck with the one teacher who's not going to give a crap that it's Christmas. And now the Christmas tree is being taken down. So Christmas tree guy and Christmas tree helper, and they tell them, yeah, every year we do this. Like, basically they rent the tree to the school. And then once the kids leave, they buy the tree back and resell it on the lot. So Christmas tree guy is played by Michael Malvesky, He's in 12 episodes of a show called Julia, which is about Julia Child.
Okay.
It's another one that came up in a bunch of people's credits in this movie. And he's also in one episode of Dexter New Blood. And Christmas Tree Helpers, played by Dakota Lustig. He's in 2 episodes of Dexter New Blood, as well as 2 episodes of American Ripper.
Cool.
And so the kids are very upset.
Yes.
And another thing that we learned, too, that they're being kind of dismissed of is, oh, you can't even sleep in your dorms during these 2 weeks. We're turning the heat off in the dorms. They have to bunk in the infirmary.
Sweet.
So they don't even have, like, their rooms. They're literally, like, stuck together in the room where you go if you're sick.
Right.
Like, they're not being treated well.
No. So, yeah.
So now you can go ahead.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So, Paul and Mary talk. We learn that they're basically friends as they commiserate over still being there.
Yeah, she's
for
the
the
one.
holidays.
So he's stuck behind with the kids. She's stuck behind running the kitchen.
Yeah.
The rest of the kitchen staff left, but she's going to be cooking their meals. We learned that she did have an invitation from her sister Peggy and her husband to go visit in Roxbury for the holidays, but she didn't feel right leaving. She's still grieving her son. The school's where she's used to spending time with her son, so she doesn't really want to go celebrate Christmas.
Teddy and Angus end up getting into a fight. Do you remember why?
Teddy and Angus get in a fight. Oh, okay. So in the beginning, when Tully was packing his bag for St. Bart's, one of the things he packed was a family photo of him and his mom and his dad.
This is over the picture. Yeah.
And his picture, it's missing from his suitcase. So he thinks Kuntz stole it. And he's right, he did, but he doesn't admit to that here. So they start physically fighting over, it started with this picture, and this is where he's talking about how his room's being renovated, and
Yeah.
and Tully's kind of egging him on about that. They get in a physical fight, and
it ends up getting broken up by Jason. Paul ends up coming in. Nope, and he wants to know who started it.
Right, he wants to know who started it. Nobody's talking. He's like, well, you're all going to get punished then. Gives them detention.
Yeah, basically for every minute that nobody ends up saying what actually happened, they're going to get more and more detentions. And, Ian ends up selling them out.
Ian.
Or, is it Ian or is that the actor's name?
It's the actor's name. Alex Allerman is the character.
Right.
Allerman. So he blames Kuntz for starting the fight. And because of that, they're not going to get punished now.
I'm not even entirely sure that's accurate anyway.
Well, I mean, if you believe that he stole the picture, which he did, he started it in that regard.
I guess so.
That was the catalyst for it all. But
Yeah.
I don't know if Tully feels more responsible for it actually becoming a physical fight.
Right. So the kids eat together. Mary brings them out food. Kuntz is basically a jackass. He basically says some rude things about Mary. He says, something along the lines of, I know her son died, but that doesn't, she's paid to do a job, so she should do it well.
The complaint is that they're being fed the same food that they had for lunch, and it sucked then, and it sucks now. Now, we did learn just a few minutes ago when Paul was talking to her that they're not going to be eating great.
Right.
They didn't have no growth, in addition to, they're sold the Christmas tree, they turned off the electricity, they're not getting any groceries. Whatever's in the freezer is all they have to work with.
Right.
Make it work. They're not getting, a nice, fresh delivery, and they're not getting a new menu. It's just, scrounge up whatever you got and eat it.
So the headmaster gave Paul crap for not acting like a human being. He's not acting like a
Right.
human
The
being
school
either.
is not being...
Yeah.
The school is not accommodating a good Christmas for these kids.
So Paul offers to have Mary join them, but she ends up declining. And Teddy's complaints ends up pissing off Paul. And he ends up going off on a spiel about what the woman's gone through. And then late at night, Paul ends up joining Mary, who's watching TV. She mentions that her kid actually hated Paul when he was her student, or when he was his student. Paul thinks he was a sharp kid. He was in the military looking to go to college. Unfortunately, that's not what ended up happening.
Right. So basically, Mary took this job.
Yep.
So that her son would have a good education, a good high school education. And even though he had amazing grades, he was a great student, scholarships still wasn't enough to send him to college. Now, it's 1970. If you don't go to college, you're going to war. If you're a college student, you get a waiver and you don't have to go to war.
Right.
So because they couldn't afford to send him to college is why he ended up in the service. And he was excited because once he finishes, then he'll have the GI Bill and he'll be able to go to college because they will pay for it. Unfortunately, he didn't make it that far.
Right.
And so she's she's basically, still grieving, of course, but talking about how these horrible human beings of kids that they're watching are warm in their room. Well, really, they're not. They're in the infirmary. And her son's, cold in the ground.
Right.
And she's having a hard time with it. And they're watching the Newlywed Game, which Paul's never heard of before. They're going to continue to watch this throughout the rest of break. And where are they at right now? I was confused by this facility.
Yeah, I'm not really sure, but it's some kind of rec room of some type.
Like, I was like, is this...
Like a common room or something?
Is this like a faculty lounge? Is this where Mary lives? Like, are these her quarters?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
If so, why did he just walk in? Like, she's in her bathrobe. She's very comfortable.
Yeah.
I was confused by the setup here.
So, she also reveals in the scene that she heard every word of what the kids were saying and what Paul said.
She also talked about Curtis's father, because we're watching the Newlywed Game. Paul asks about, how long were you married? She wasn't actually married to him. They were engaged. She got pregnant, and then he died before Curtis was even born. He died in a workplace injury. So she's been a single mom Curtis's entire life.
Right.
And has always had it pretty rough. And now she lost both her lover and her son, which is so heartbreaking. This woman's had a pretty rough life.
So the next morning, Paul wakes up the kids with pots and pans and makes them go on a run.
He actually woke them up with bedpans because they're in the infirmary.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that was kind of
pretty gross.
And we get a title card telling us that it's now December 20th. We're on day 4 of holding over.
So out in the courtyard, Teddy continues to be a charmer. He basically ends up throwing Parks something or other away.
He took one of his mittens.
Yeah.
And he's bullying the younger kids now. And we also learned during this, and this was important to me, it hit me, that Jason Smith's father is the CEO of Pratt & Whitney.
Okay.
Which is the company my husband works
for.
And so they're like trying to think of ways they can escape, right? They want to leave. They want to get out of this nightmare that they are living in. And so one of them suggests, like, hey, your dad could just, like, land his helicopter here and take us away, which is funny because they're joking, but that's actually what ends up happening.
So Angus reveals that if he's kicked out of school, he's going to end up at Fort Union Military School. And then later, Park ends up waking up from a nightmare and is comforted by Angus, who's actually, being nice here.
He's being very nice. Like,
yeah.
So Tully and Park kind of end up with a little bit of bond, right? Mm-hmm. So we've got Kuntz, who's bullying the kids, and Tully's kind of like supporting them.
Right.
So I don't know, is it like enemy of thine enemy is my friend?
Maybe.
Or something like that?
It could be something like that.
So he admits that he has nightmares too, and the kid had an accident in the bed, and Tully says he'll help him hide the sheets. I thought this was going to be more, but it didn't end up being more. Like we didn't get back to this.
Nope.
It was just that little moment to show us, like, hey, yeah, he's not that bad of a guy.
Right.
He's just that bad of a guy to the people who are that bad to him.
Right. So they are studying.
And it's now day 6, so 2 more days have passed, December 22nd.
And they hear a helicopter. And the rest of the kids, they all go to the window to see the helicopter. And Jason realizes this is his father coming to rescue him. He invites the rest of the kids along for skiing, but his parents can't be reached.
Right. So Paul calls all of the kids and the headmaster to get permission because, he can't just, like, release these kids to the helicopter. But he gets a hold of everybody, even the ones that where were they, Uruguay or something?
Yeah.
He gets a hold of everybody except Tully's mom.
Right. So which means he and Paul and Mary are still stuck together.
Yeah. And Jason's father is played by Greg Chaporian, who's also in an episode of Julia. He was in the movie True Lies.
Oh, with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And a bunch of stuff in between.
Cool.
So everybody leaves. Everybody leaves except for Tully. And, as he's leaving, Kuntz gives him back that family photo. So he did steal it.
Yeah.
Except he defaced it now and wrote some vulgar things on it, which is really sad because this photo is important to Tully.
Yeah. So Angus tries to book a hotel to get out of here, but Paul ends up catching him and stopping him, and then gives him a detention when Angus starts mouthing off. Angus says being here with him is one long detention, and this leads to a chase scene, which results in Angus jumping in the gymnasium and getting himself hurt.
So he wasn't, remember, they're not supposed to step on the floor. That's the whole deal, is, like, that's the ultimate thing, is you can't walk on the floor is not finished yet. But he does, and he gets hurt and realizes it was a horrible mistake.
And so they end up having to clear off Paul's car and drive to the ambulance, or drive to the hospital, rather. At the hospital, Paul worries about being fired, but Angus ends up covering for him, saying, or he basically says that to keep it off the insurance, to just pay in cash, because this is his father, and if the mother learns that, that this happened, then he could get in trouble, and then maybe they won't be able to see each other anymore.
Right. So the ER nurse is played by Rena Malazewski. She's in 3 episodes of Found and the movie Don't Look Up.
Which several people in this film were also in that as well.
And then we go in and we meet the ER doc. So that was convincing.
Yeah.
She ends up agreeing that the school's not going to find out about this because there's going to be no paper trail. And then we go in to meet the ER doctor. He is played by Jonathan Von Mering. He is in 1 episode of Big Sky as well as 1 episode of Julia. He gives him the good news that his arm's not broken. It's just out of his shoulders dislocated. So the nurse and the doctor work together to reset the arm.
It wasn't a very pleasant scene.
It wasn't a pleasant scene, and this looked harder and worse than I've ever seen. Now, I've never seen a real life, shoulder dislocation thing, but
I don't want to.
In most media, they make it look like it's not that big of a deal.
Right, you just jerk
it. In this scene, it looked like a big deal. Maybe it's because it's 1970.
Yeah, maybe.
But it was like, whoa, what is happening here?
Yeah, it was not very pleasant to watch.
And then they go from there, they go to see the pharmacist to get his pain meds filled. Like, this is the in-hospital pharmacist. He's played by Osmani Rodriguez, who is in 6 episodes of Kevin Can F himself, as well as an episode of Castle Rock. And they talk during this. Paul's upset that Tully lied.
Yeah, he says Barton men don't lie.
Right. Of course, he's happy he's not going to get fired, but he doesn't like the fact that Tully made this whole story up.
So Angus ends up leveraging this fact that he just did this for Paul into a dinner at a burger joint.
It's a tavern.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bar that serves food. And it's called The Winning Ticket. The Winning Ticket Bar and Grill. And so they went there, which is a big deal because we already learned Paul doesn't even leave campus.
Right.
Like, he would never have come into this place just on a regular night. The only reason they're here is because they had to go to the hospital. And now Tully's acting like he owes him something, so he's going along with it because he doesn't want to get fired.
And they end up getting served by Mrs. Crane.
Yeah, Lydia Crane is the waitress, and she says, yeah, she always works here over the holidays. Paul should probably know that, but again, he doesn't ever leave his room.
Angus goes off to the bathroom. I think Paul mentions that he actually wants to go to a payphone.
Right, because we had that whole thing where he's, like, trying to escape, right?
Right.
But he's not necessarily trying to escape. He really did the bathroom. After trying to order a beer.
Yes.
Throughout the film from this point forward, we have this ongoing thing about Miller High Life, the champagne of beers.
Yep.
Is that the tagline? He really wants it. Paul, of course, says no. And, like, Miss Crane's your waitress, so you're not getting any leverage there.
Nope.
So he ends up getting a Coke instead, but Paul orders Jim Beam, which he has a drinking problem, this man.
Yeah.
He's drinking in every scene.
He does indeed. Would you like to stage an intervention for him?
But then they both get a cheeseburger, and like you said, Tully goes off, and he does go to the bathroom. When he gets out of the bathroom, he wants to play pinball. There's a pinball machine. Somebody's playing it. He puts his dime down, which is your indication of you've got next game, right?
Yeah.
But pinball player tells him, nah, my buddy's next. You can't have the next game. Mm-hmm. And Tully's about to, like, fight with him. So pinball player is played by Oscar Wahlberg. He is in 8 episodes of Dexter New Blood, 2 episodes of Nosferatu. And Tully's about to get physical. Tully loves fighting.
Yes.
He's a very argumentative and physical person.
Yep. And, I think this is the guy that's also a Vietnam vet. No. That's the other guy.
His friend.
Yeah.
So the friend who's supposed to play, pinball player calls his friend, who is Vietnam vet Kenneth, is his title, his character credit, who is kind of a bigger guy, and he has a hook for a hand. He lost a hand in Vietnam. And so Tully immediately backs down. He doesn't want to fight with this guy, right?
Also, I think something we didn't mention happens slightly before this, in that Mrs. Crane and Paul end up talking, and she ends up inviting him to a Christmas party.
Yeah, so she's throwing a Christmas party and invited him and Tully to come along to the Christmas Eve party, which I think is the next night at this point.
So,
so yeah, he's trying to back down of wanting to fight with these guys because this guy's a big, scary Vietnam vet with a hook for a hand. And he's like, oh, no, you can just have my dime. And, of course, that's offensive to the guy. Like, I don't need your dime.
Right.
So they're looking at him like, oh, you're a fancy Barton boy. Like, we're at the townies now. The townies don't see nicely on these privileged little boys from this private school.
Yep.
And then he's like, no, like, we'll play together. Because, like, you're missing one hand and I have one hand in a sling, so we can play together.
Now, on the one hand, that sounds like him being a jackass, and he kind of sort of plays it like that at the same time. But I don't think he was actually trying to be insulting.
No, I think he was trying to be sincere, and he was trying not to be rude.
But in doing so, he ends up just being kind of dumb.
Yeah, so we show that he's not really this big tough guy that he pretends to be, and he ran back to Paul and was like, can we please leave now? Now, mind you, they haven't even eaten yet. And he thinks that, like, he's about to get the crap beat out of him. But instead, both Paul and Miss Crane diffuse the situation, and he buys the guys a beer, and we settle it.
Angus ends up telling... on the way out, Paul is giving Tully some crap for, like, hey, this guy, he went to Vietnam and lost a hand. Meanwhile, you're this privileged boy who goes to Barton. On the way to the car, Angus ends up telling him that he smells like fish. And this is because of a condition that I did not take note of.
I got it, but let's see if I can even get a little bit close to saying it. It's called trimethylalbuminuria.
That sounds somewhat close.
Something with a T.
Yeah.
It's a disorder that prevents his body from breaking down trimethylamine.
That sounds close.
So yeah, they're starting to kind of open up to each other a little bit, right? So yeah, he has some disorder which makes him stink. And that's maybe a little bit why he is scared around women, according to Tully. And Tully ends up bringing up his therapist, Dr. Gertler, so we know he's in therapy, which is 1970, so that's a much bigger admission than it would be today.
Yep.
Let's see. Oh, I also have a one uncredited reference here. We have a tavern diner, played by Jane Howes, so she was somebody hanging out in the tavern. And it's interesting, she was actually Winona Ryder and Christina Ricci's stand-in on the movie Mermaids.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, so they're talking about, he was nice to them because they had to go to Vietnam, and you don't have to.
Right.
Because you're going to end up in college, because you are privileged. That's really, like, the big theme of this movie is you're privileged, and because of that, you're not going to die in the war like Curtis Lamb did.
Right. So, Paul and Mary the next day... Actually, whoa, okay. So, I skipped a few scenes here. Okay, so next day, Mary asks where they were for dinner. Paul says it was school business. And Mary's all like, you guys didn't call, like, a jealous wife.
Well, I get it, because her literal job's to cook for them.
Yeah.
Just the two of them now.
Yeah.
And they didn't show up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
They should have told her they weren't having dinner there.
Danny comes in with a mop. And both of these guys are basically jackasses, so let's just be real here. Danny comes in with a mop to clean up the vomit from the previous day.
Yeah, so this is where he finally comes back. And this is where I'm like, oh, wait, he's working too over break?
Yep.
Like, has he been here the whole time?
Right.
Where's he been? How come he's not been having meals with him? He will now going forward.
Yeah, he's not a main star, so he's not really important.
But he's also working. So why is he not been here? Like, does he live on campus like Mary and Paul do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was confused by that. But anyways, yeah, he comes back, and nobody will admit to knowing anything about why there's puke in the gym. And mind you, we're not supposed to even step on the gym floor.
I'm actually kind of curious. Who was the one that vomited? Was it Tully? Or...
I'm sure it was Tully, because he was in
Paul
so much pain. I'm sure it was Tully.
Yeah, okay.
But, like, he's like, I don't know anything about that. And Danny puts the mop, like, the bucket, like, right next to Tully. Like, I know that you know what happened.
Right.
And everybody's covering for you, you privileged little...
Shit.
Yeah.
Paul and Mary are preparing food. Mary reveals as Angus comes in that there's a Christmas party that Angus it basically wants to go to, but Paul is very reluctant, and Angus gets kind of mad. Like, maybe you can just stick around here and do nothing, but I want to go and do something.
Right. And Mary says, if you don't want to go, I'll take him to the party.
Right.
She's going anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Paul's like, no, that's not how it works. He's in my care. So Tully leaves all upset. And Mary starts giving Paul some crap for that. She's like, it's Christmas. Like, you might be fine with this, but, like, this kid it's Christmas.
Right.
Like, why are you trying to make it worse for him? Take him to the freaking party. It's not a big deal.
No,
they decide to go to the party.
I like their relationship. They call each other on each other's shit.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
And Mary does that more than Paul, but yeah. So they go to the party.
All three of them prep for the party, and they drive there together. And Mary brought brownies, which Lydia is very excited about. Lydia Crane. She takes them and she says she's going to go hide them away and save them for herself. Paul knows that there's a lot of people here. He's not great with that. And Lydia says they're the only ones from work, which also confused me because, again, what about Danny? He ends up coming to the party later.
Yeah, he doesn't matter.
Like, was he not invited?
Maybe not. Maybe just...
Or does Lydia dismiss him like that he's not a co-worker, he's just the custodian?
Or maybe he wasn't there yet, and...
But she's like, yeah, I've got friends and family here, but you're the only two from work.
Right. Maybe she doesn't know if Danny is coming, or...
I just thought it was weird that we're omitting him here.
So Angus ends up wandering.
Well, he's introduced, specifically.
Well, at first he sees a snow globe, and then he gets introduced to her niece, Lydia's niece, Louise.
Okay.
And she's played by Darby Lee Stack with only 3 credits. I didn't take note of any of them. But...
She's also, her other credits were movies, Beautiful, Monster, and Hidden. I've never heard of either of those. But I felt like I recognized this girl, so I was trying to figure out what do I know you from, and nothing is the answer. I mean, maybe she did something background or a commercial or something.
Perhaps.
That's not on IMDb, So I felt like I recognized her.
Yeah, she looked familiar.
But yeah, this is Lydia's niece Elise, and she's asked to take him to the basement to show him the family tradition.
So they go up to Bond. Danny ends up giving Mary a present. He's come into the party. He ends up hitting on her a little bit. So we get a little flirtatious relationship there. He
gives her a leaf brooch. She's upset because she didn't get anything for him, but he says her beautiful smile is enough for her. So they're close. They got a good relationship. And, we got a couple uncredited people we met during these scenes, which was Lydia Crane's mother, who's played by Elaine Victoria Gray, and her sister, Kathy, played by Reb Powers.
So, Elise and Angus finger paint, and he unsubtly tries to look down her shirt. What a rookie. And they end up kissing. And it's a shame that we don't see her for the rest of the film, because they have some chemistry here.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And he was very upset when he had to leave the party.
Yes. Paul gets a kiss under the mistletoe by Mrs. Crane.
Miss Crane. You keep saying Mrs. I'm going to point out she's not married. It's Miss Crane. You're making it sound very bad that you keep calling her Mrs.
But she does have a boyfriend.
She does, which he's soon going to learn and be very kind of... That bursts his bubble a little bit, that she does have a boyfriend.
So he reveals that he has no family. His only break from Barton, really, was a stint at college.
Yeah, he's been at Barton ever since he was 15 and got a scholarship. That's when he left home. His mom died when he was young. Hasn't seen dad since he was 15 and went to Barton. Went to college, ended up back at Barton. Been there ever since. It's all he knows. Mm-hmm. He has no family. He has no friends.
It's a very
This
sad
party's
life.
Probably the biggest social event he's ever been at in his life.
It's bigger than any social event I've been in recently. Danny and Mary listen to music, and she's getting drunk.
Yeah, she puts
angry.
on a song that her son loved, and then this other guy, who's credited as hip party guest, comes in and asks her to put on some hipper music, but she gets very drunkenly upset at the idea of turning off her son's song. Hip party guest is played by Mike Kaz. He is in the upcoming Salem's Lot film, which might already be out by the time this airs.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that drops. Crane suggests Paul do something for Angus for Christmas, and then she goes to greet her boyfriend.
Yeah, which nobody knew about.
Yes.
So Miss Crane's boyfriend is played by Ian Lyons. He is in 2 episodes of Julia, 1 episode of Dexter New Blood. And the first time I watched this film, I completely missed that scene. I didn't see her walk away and go kiss some guy. So when I was doing the credits and there's Miss Crane's boyfriend, I'm like, wait, what? Was he who is that? I missed that she had a boyfriend. I must have blinked the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really, really quick scene. So Angus comes and gets Paul. Mary is getting emotional. How did Angus end up involved in this?
Yeah, he must have just maybe I don't know. He must have came upstairs and walked in on it.
Last we saw, Angus was making out with...
He's kissing the girl in the basement. Yeah, I can't imagine he just was too eager to go into the kitchen, but maybe he went to get them a beverage.
Perhaps. A non-alcoholic beverage, I assume.
Oh, of course. Not Miller High Life at all.
So, yeah.
So he brings Paul in to help with Mary. She's having a breakdown in the kitchen. So it's just Paul and Tully, Mary, and Danny in the kitchen. He closes the door to the kitchen because this is back when kitchens had doors that were closed off from the rest of the house. So they close the door. It's just them talking, and they're trying to help her, because she's obviously a drunken mess at this point.
They end up leaving the party, and Angus basically wants to drop her off and then come back to the party, but Paul's not having it.
Right.
He has a reason to want to come back here, basically because he's been making out with this girl and he's been really bonding with her, and now he's probably never going to see her again.
And Paul doesn't want to come back because he just found out Miss Crane has a boyfriend.
Yes. So kind of like opposing forces here. And Angus and Paul get into it. Paul says he doesn't want to be looking after him. And Angus says to him, after he mentions his dad...
Yeah, he says, I was hoping your father would arrive in a helicopter or a submarine or a spaceship and take you out of my hair.
And Angus says that his father is dead, which is not actually accurate.
It's not accurate, and I get that they didn't want us to know that Dad was still alive. But, after knowing that fact and watching the movie the second time, I'm just really confused by this scene. Why did he go to my dad is dead?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I think it's...
Because it's not like he's dead to me.
Right.
If him and his dad had a bad relationship, I can see him saying, my dad's dead. If he doesn't want to have anything to do with his dad, but he does want to have something to do with his dad.
I think the reason he says it is to inflict maximum damage on Paul. He's trying to hurt him in this scene.
I guess I can see that, but it felt really kind of weird and skeevy. Especially since you're in the presence of this woman whose son is dead.
Yeah. But he's a teenager, so he's not really thinking about that. It's a good question. I think there's something motivating that. I'm not totally sure I could tell you what, other than he's just trying to make Paul feel really, really guilty.
So he kind of goes off to the car by himself. Paul and Mary are left behind. She's yelling at him.
Yeah, Mary, despite the fact that she's a drunken mess, is giving Paul crap.
Now, she has more sympathy for Tully. Not that she didn't already, but now she has even more because she thinks his father's dead.
Right.
Which he isn't.
Right.
And Paul feels like the butt that he is.
Yeah.
And Mary's basically like, you don't tell a kid who's been left behind at Christmas that nobody wants him. Your job here is to make him feel okay, and you're doing the opposite of that.
I mean, it's not like the school actually has put any kind of investment in making sure that he's okay, or any of the kids that were left behind are okay.
Right.
But still. So Paul ends up going and buying a Christmas tree.
Yeah, so he wakes up very early in the morning, and he's had a change of heart. He realizes... maybe I do need to care that it's Christmas. It's Christmas morning now. I'm gonna, he's, what's the Grinch. He's like the Grinch. He woke up and is like, oh, Christmas, great, yay, I'm gonna go celebrate Christmas. So he goes to get a tree, and he gets, the last tree on the lot. This is basically this Charlie Brown Christmas tree. And, but when he comes back... Tully's gone. So he left. Tully was still asleep, and it's very early, and he thinks he's going to get back before Tully wakes up, but Tully's gone. He's searching the whole campus looking for Tully, manages to say Merry Christmas to Mary in the process. He thinks Tully skipped out. He thinks Tully's gone. Yeah. He's going to get fired again. But then he finds him. He finds him in the auditorium. He's hanging out, playing on the piano. And Tully's like, what? I'm right here.
So Paul gathers up Tully and Mary and ends up giving them Christmas presents. They both end up getting the same book.
This was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And one thing I don't think I mentioned is throughout the entire film, Paul doesn't ever miss an opportunity to give a history lesson. Every conversation, he's giving a history lesson that nobody cares about. Every single scene. He's saying something historical.
Yeah.
And that's all he knows how to do. Like, he does not know how to talk to people.
Right.
Without being like, oh, here's some ancient history you don't care about.
So, in my view, this was his way of trying to relate to people.
Right.
That just doesn't actually work.
He has no people skills, and he doesn't know it.
Yeah. And also, is that a real book? Did you happen to look into that?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know any of the stuff he's talking about throughout this movie. I'm not a history person.
So, in addition to Mary getting this book, he also gives her some alcohol.
Bottle of booze, because they like to drink together. And Tully gets a card full of cash from his mom and stepdad. Very impersonal Christmas gift.
Yeah. They end up having a Christmas dinner together.
Which was a feast compared to everything else they've been eating this whole break. Meaning, Mary went out of her way to do something special for Christmas.
This came out of her pocket.
Yeah, she put together a beautiful meal. That didn't come from the leftover freezer.
Mm-hmm. And this is something that Angus has never experienced before.
Yeah, he calls this his first family Christmas. And then I think he's a little embarrassed to say that. He's like, I mean a nice meal. It's a nice meal.
Right. Angus wants to go to Boston. Paul initially says no.
So it starts because Paul's like, I want to make this a Merry Christmas. Anything I can do to make the holiday better for either of you, just let me know, anything at all. And Paul's like, great, let's go to Boston. And he's like, no.
Yeah. But then Paul ends up relenting and saying that they could call it a field trip.
Right. He says, well, we actually do have funds for that. Like, there was money given to him for extra educational enrichment.
Mary's going along, but she's going to get dropped off.
Yeah, she wants to go to Roxbury after all to see her sister, which she originally didn't want to do, but that's close to where they're going, right? I think Roxbury's a neighborhood in Boston. So they agree to do that, and we're going to go on a field trip.
So they head to Boston, and they get to where Mary is being dropped off. And Mary is bringing up some of Mary's stuff.
Tully is bringing up Mary's stuff.
What did I just say?
Mary is bringing up Mary's stuff.
That is not what I meant to say. Yes, Tully is bringing up Mary's stuff. Being a true gentleman, but though he's somewhat prompted to do so by Paul.
So we're on the 4th floor,
Yeah.
is where the sister lives. So and it's icy. He brings up Mary's bags and then helps her up. Each step of the way having to be prompted of what's the right thing to do.
Her sister is played by Janita Pearl, and I have no credits for her.
Juanita Pearl.
Juanita, okay.
She was in a couple of shorts, nothing I took specific note of.
Okay, that's probably why I don't have any credits for her.
And the husband, he's an uncredited listing, played by Ezra Stevens.
Okay. So Paul and Angus end up going into town, where a prostitute tries to pick them up.
Yeah, they're at an open air bookstore,
which looks really cool. I kind of want to visit.
It looked. I was like, the snow was probably really bad for these books.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
It's actively snowing on these books. But guess what? This is a real place.
Is it?
This is a real open air bookstore. It's called Brattle Bookshop. It's on West Street in Boston. It's open today.
I want to go visit.
It's very strange to me how that works in a city that gets so much weather.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, this hooker comes and tries to pick up Paul. She is played by Melissa McKeegan. She was in 2 episodes of 30 Rock and an episode of Orange is the New Black. She also looked really familiar to me, but I didn't see why she might have been. I couldn't see anything in her filmography that stood out to me. But Paul shoots her down, and then Tully gives him a hard time for that.
So
there's also an uncredited listing here for bookstore shopper. It's a guy kind of shopping in the background. He's played by Jim Boyd.
Okay. Nothing for him? Okay.
I didn't really take notes for most of the uncredited people. We had a lot of credited people to worry about notes for.
Yes. So they end up going to a museum.
This is the Boston Museum of Fine Arts.
Which I've been to.
Have you?
I have.
So this is the one location in the film that took me out of our setting of 1970.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know what a museum looks like in 1970, but these displays felt really modern for me. Like it was these like stark, glass cases, and I feel like it would have been a little more relaxed in 1970. Like it wouldn't have been as clean and crisp as it looks now. But obviously they're filming in the actual museum, so it looks like what it looks like.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do with that.
Yeah.
At least there wasn't like digital displays and
Right. I mean, again, I was just like, oh, is this what a museum would look like in 1970? I don't feel like it is.
So the museum bores Angus, and Paul gives a speech about basically saying that history is...
Yeah, he shows him, like, so they're looking at, like, ancient pottery artifacts or something. So he's doing what he said. Like, he's making this an educational trip, right? And Angus is like, this isn't what I meant if I go to Boston.
Right.
But yeah, he shows him a piece of pottery that has some sexual act depicted on it, and that sparked his interest.
Yeah.
And so then he, like, explains history to him in a way that made more sense to Tully. And he was talking about how everything that you think is new and hip and defiant, you know, it all existed previously.
Right.
Nothing is new in this world. And everything you can ever imagine has already happened. And that's what we talk about in these ancient civilizations. Like, all we're doing is repeating history. And he says this in a way that Tully's like, oh, well, why don't you teach like that? Because that sounds pretty cool.
Yep. And
like, they're teaching each other, right?
Yes.
How to be better human beings right now.
And he mentions that the kids and teachers dislike him. Paul, that is. And then Angus goes skating while Paul watches.
Yeah, Paul watches Tully go ice skating. He falls. Now, Dominic Sessa said that he found this to be the hardest scene to film because he's actually a hockey player. And the idea of falling on purpose was something he just could not wrap his head around because this scene required him to just, like, fall on his face. And he was just like, I don't know how to do that.
Right. So
that had to have been fun to film.
I'm sure it was. Paul ends up running into a former classmate of his, and this guy is played by Kelly Aucoin. 66 credits to him. It's 66 credits for him, and they were both in the show Billions together.
Yes, he was in 69 episodes, so a quite regular character. He was also in 5 episodes of Law & Order. The character is Hugh Kavanaugh, and he is with his wife. Mrs. Kavanaugh is played by Colleen Clinton, who is in 1 episode of Billions, as well as 8 episodes of Days of Our Lives.
So,
and she's given the name Karen. Again, that name doesn't make it into the credits. The credits just call her Mrs. Kavanaugh, but they call her Karen. She's really nice, though. She's not a Karen.
No, not like how you would typically think of a Karen.
Yeah, she's a 1970 Karen, not a 2024 Karen.
Right.
So Paul and Hugh went to Harvard together. That's how they know each other. And but Hugh's really successful. He was actually just got tenure teaching statistics at Harvard. And his wife's just going on and on bragging for him. Now, he seems like an okay guy. He wasn't bragging for himself. His wife was doing all the bragging. But he asked Paul, how are you doing?
Right.
And Paul says he's an educator as well. But then he lies, and he makes up this story. And he says how he's teaching abroad and currently located in Antwerp. And he's just home for the holidays. And then they ask who Tully is, and Tully jumps in on the lie, right? They're getting really good at telling tales together. And he introduces himself as Paul's nephew, Leonard, and tells him that Uncle Paul's writing a book about ancient cameras. Paul kind of saves the conversation by saying that it's about the camera obscura, which I don't know what that is because, again, I'm not a history person. But the book is called Lights and Magic in the Ancient World, and Hugh seems relatively impressed by this information and says, I'm happy that you landed on your feet. So he buys the lie.
Yes. And then, of course, Angus picks up on this landing on his feet bit. And this is actually where we learn later, after he leaves these two, in some kind of store. That
okay, so real quick before you go there, we have one uncredited here, an ice rink patron played by Nicole Cerullo. And where they go is into a liquor store.
Okay.
So it's a liquor store. Which, again, every scene is filmed in a practical location. So they're filming this in an actual liquor store. And the liquor store cashier, who, we'll talk about the conversation in a second, but at the end of the conversation, the liquor store cashier calls him Killer, right, as they do the transaction. That guy is played by Joe Howell, who actually is the owner of this liquor store.
That's funny.
He's not an actor. He's the dude that runs the liquor store, and they had him film the scene. Which is super cool that they didn't kick him out and be like, let's put an actor in here.
Right. Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about the conversation they have at the liquor store.
Yeah, so Angus ends up learning that Paul was actually kicked out of Harvard, that he never actually finished going to school there, and he never actually finished his education anywhere. He got kicked out because he hit someone with a car by accident, supposedly, after he was accused of plagiarism.
Right, so this was his roommate at Harvard. His roommate plagiarized off of him, is what happened. So the roommate's a cheater, a privileged asshole. Paul was there on scholarship. He's not privileged.
Right.
Paul did the work. The roommate copied it. Paul got accused of being the one doing the plagiarism. The roommate father was a big donor, so they believed him.
Right.
So it's the same situation as the senator's son, where he didn't deserve any credit for anything, but he got it, and Paul ended up getting kicked out of school because of it.
Right. So I'm thinking perhaps that's why he was so tough on the senator's son.
Absolutely. He has a vendetta against privileged kids who don't earn their way because this experience ruined his life.
And that's part of the reason why he's so hard on the kids in general. And particularly Tully. So, yeah.
So Tully's really excited to hear any of these stories because this is all like you did what now? Yeah, he hit somebody with a car, but he deserved it.
Right. So, basically, Paul ends up saying that the rest of the school cannot know about this.
Yeah, nobody knows this. The only person who knew is Dr. Green. That's the former headmaster. He's gone now. He was Paul's mentor when he was in high school.
Right.
And he's the one that gave him the job, knowing that he didn't actually graduate. And, he's gone now. So nobody knows that he's not actually even qualified to teach. Like, he never got his degree.
Right. And they use a phrase here that starts here that we can keep hearing from here on out. Entre nous. I don't think that's how it's pronounced, but yeah.
I didn't write down what they said, but basically, we're going to keep this between us.
Right.
Is the whole connotation. Well, it started, actually, this isn't the first time. They first said it in the hospital when
that's
they
right.
weren't going to tell anybody what happened with the arm thing.
Gotcha. I guess I just missed it in that scene.
Yeah, so it started there, but it goes a few more times. And so, yeah, basically, they've got a lot of secrets now, and what we're seeing is, wow, and they're both seeing it, too, at this point, is they really have a lot in common.
Yes.
Getting kicked out of schools for being a troublemaker.
Right.
And for being a little violent.
Yeah, and in the very next scene, the next morning, they're going to find something else that they have in common.
So it's now December 27th, day 11 of the holdover. And Tully goes to the bathroom and drops his prescription for Librium.
And, so Tully kind of just plays it off as something he needs to take. And then after Tully goes to the bathroom, Paul pulls out the same drug that he himself takes, and it's for depression.
Right. So they both are taking the same prescription. They both have depression. They have so much in common. And I think they're literally just now learning it themselves and realizing, we're really not that different. We're very similar human beings.
Angus goes bowling with Paul. And
before they go bowl, so we get a lot of scenes. They walk around Boston. We get this whole montage of them walking through Boston. This is one of those scenes where I saw people nitpicking. They passed the Chinatown Gate. And actually, this wasn't built until 1982.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that was one of those historical moments. But the rest of the scene was dressed really well. It was all full of, dozens of, 1970 era vehicles. So
gotcha.
They did a great job dressing the scene. But yeah, they probably shouldn't have shown something that didn't exist yet. Okay, so then they go candlepin bowling. And Tully has to give Paul some pointers because he doesn't know how to bowl, but Tully's apparently pretty good at it. So they're bonding. They're doing pretty good. They're having a great time, really.
And you see Angus, notice a couple of girls next to him. And then he ends up asking Paul about his eye. Which one he should be looking at, which one is the real eye. Which I didn't even notice throughout the entire film up until this point. Until Tully's pointing it out.
I don't think it's a fake eye. I think it's just a lazy eye.
Oh, lazy eye. Okay.
I think.
Okay.
But yeah, only one of his eyes works.
Gotcha.
But Paul won't tell him.
Right. Paul goes and gets a beer, and you see that Angus is flirting with these girls in the background.
Yes, and one of the girls, uncredited, is a character named Christy, played by Lily Stephen. We also have an uncredited bowler, played by Timothy Conley. And at the bar, we run into our priest/bartender again. This is his second role. We already talked about him, Alexander Cook.
And a guy in a Santa Claus suit, which Paul cannot help himself. He's trying to, I don't think he's trying to be an ass here. I think he's trying to bond with
He's trying to have a conversation, but he doesn't know how, so he just gives some history lesson about the Santa Claus uniform. And they just kind of look at him like he has 12 heads.
Yeah. Basically, it's how his Santa Claus outfit is historically inaccurate.
Yeah, and Santa Claus is played by Fred Robbins, who's also in the upcoming Salem's Lot film.
So they go to the movies.
They go to watch Little Big Man. We have an irritated movie patron played by Kevin Fennessy, who is in one episode of Kevin Can F Himself, 2 episodes of Castle Rock. He was actually in the movie Big.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. Oh, okay.
Is just some bit part, but
Huh.
his career goes back that far, and he shushes Paul because Paul, of course, is giving history lessons over the film because that's all that Paul knows how to do is just give history lessons.
Right.
But Paul tells him to F off, so he's standing up for himself now.
That's nice. This is the wrong time to do it, but
Right,
sure.
but
because Tully is totally right here. But yeah, so Angus tries to sneak off, but Paul ends up catching him, and Paul realizes that okay. So
Paul says,
Yeah.
Tully says he's going to go to the bathroom. It's been a beat, and Paul realizes, like, oh, he's trying to give me the slip again. So he chases after him and catches. He didn't take long because he catches up with him at the cab. So this is
Right.
all happening while Tully's sitting in the cab, and Paul's trying to stop him and pull him out of it.
And Tully basically says that he wants to go and see his father. And Paul is like, why didn't you just say so?
Right,
Of course
because
we can
he
get.
at first he doesn't want to say that. He's like, just let me go. I have to do something. I'll meet you at the hotel. It's not a big deal. And he's like, no, I'm not just letting you alone in Boston.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
are you crazy? Then he's like, okay, just come with me. Please, just come with me. I have to go. And when he says, what is it? He said, I need to go see my dad. And he's like, of course we can go to the cemetery. Like, you could have just asked me to take you to the cemetery. We could have done that.
But of course, that is not where they are going.
That is not where they're going. And before we go there, I do have one more uncredited person here, the pedestrian / movie theater patron played by Kazina Maxine.
Now, I actually would have liked to have seen this scene where Paul, actually learns the truth here.
Right. We kind of skip over that. And I'm assuming he didn't tell him in that moment. I'm assuming he waited for him to get in the cab to go to the cemetery before telling him the truth.
Right.
But yeah, we didn't see him explain what's really going on to Paul.
And this moment seals his fate. This is the moment that leads to what happens to Paul at the end. But Paul ends up taking him to the institution to see his father. His father is played by Stephen Thorne. 6 credits for him, including Don't Look Up, which a lot of these actors that have appeared here have appeared also in that film.
Yeah.
It's a Netflix film with Leonardo DiCaprio. It's kind of like a climate change kind of metaphor movie about the end of the world.
It's one that Adam refused to watch because he doesn't like watching things about the end of the world.
Ah, gotcha.
He acted like it's a documentary.
It is not.
He's brought up by the psychiatric orderly, played by David T. Curtis, who's in 4 episodes of Dexter New Blood, 1 episode of Kevin Can F Himself. You can just pretty much guess anybody we mentions in these shows.
I feel like we should be watching that show now and
I
covering
mean, that's how our thing works,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We land in these places where
Well,
we just find other stuff.
I mean, we
based
already
on
knew that
other
Raymond
stuff.
Lee was in that show, so
Right. So Paul's waiting in the hallway. He doesn't interfere with this. Tully goes into this common room where he meets with his dad, and they chat. And Tully tells his dad that he missed him, and he's talking about all these accomplishments he has at school, including getting the best grade in his ancient civ class. He's going to play tennis in the fall, or in the spring rather, and he's just really excited to catch up with his dad, and then he realizes how far gone his dad really is.
yeah, his dad. The only thing that he says in return is that they are putting something in his food.
Yeah.
So Angus ends up opening up to Paul, and Paul tells him that he can be a pain, but he is not his old man. He's smart and has time to turn things around.
And 2 uncredited listings from the hospital. We have another hospital orderly played by Josh Habib and a doctor played by Joe Curtin. So now they're having this conversation, and we pretty soon realize that they're having this conversation at a fancy restaurant where they're eating dinner.
And they're soon going to be joined by Mary, and basically...
Well, he tells the story about what happened with his dad, and he's
Yeah.
really opening up because I don't think he's dealt with any of this before.
He doesn't want Mary to know any of this information, though, and Paul basically says, entre nous.
Yeah, this whole trip. Like,
yeah.
we're not telling anybody anything. Like,
Yeah,
we have
the
so
whole-
many
the whole
secrets
trip,
now.
yep. Angus can't have a dessert.
Okay, so the next table over is making Cherry's Jubilee.
Yes.
So we have the maitre d' that seats Mary, and he is played by Davis Robinson, who was in The Next Karate Kid, 1 episode of Julia. The waitress is played by Pamela Jane Morgan. She's in 1 episode of Julia, 1 episode of SVU. And yeah, she tells him she can't serve him the Cherry's Jubilee because it has brandy in it. Mary's like, what's the big deal? The alcohol burns off, and she's like, I'm sorry, I can't serve it.
It's not like you're getting drunk off.
So Paul says, okay, I'll order it.
Yeah.
But she won't do that either because she knows he wants to share it, and she's like, I'm sorry, you're not getting it. So they end up ordering ice cream and cherries to go and calling her some names, the waitress.
Right. And they end up, like, basically making Cherry's Jubilee on the hood of his car.
Yeah, in the park. So in the parking lot in front of the restaurant, they pour some of the Jim Beam into the ice cream and light it on fire, but they used a little too much alcohol, and it kind of creates this uncontrollable fire. They are not going to end up eating that ice cream. It ends up on the ground getting stomped out of fire.
Well, I mean, it was cool nonetheless.
There's a reason that the fancy restaurant does this and not, guys outside.
So the what I'm taking from the scene is that I should not try this.
I wouldn't suggest it.
Okay.
No. Uncredited in the restaurant scene, we have restaurant patron Judy Finkler, fancy restaurant patron Howie Breslow, and angry restaurant patron Paul S. Warner.
That sounds familiar, that name. So back at the school, they watched the ball drop for Happy New Year's. It's no longer Christmas. That means this is no longer a Christmas movie, but a New Year's movie.
Ah, yes. And
maybe this should be our last movie. Like, so we can, like, transition
I'm sure a lot of our films are going to do that, though. It seems to be pretty typical that we don't run into New Year's. Before we leave Boston real quick, a couple more various Boston uncredited listings. We have a pedestrian, John DeVito, another hooker, Jasmine Gomes, a Boston streeter / pedestrian, I don't know what that means, Banu Gopal, and a subway pedestrian, Louise Mara.
All right.
And yeah, so now we're back in campus. Danny's joined them for this, so he's in the mix now. They're watching the ball drop on TV. Tully's acquired a firecracker?
Something along those lines. He wants to light it off, but Paul is like, no, we can't do that here. But he ends up going to the kitchen to light it off instead.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been better to just do that outside?
I don't know, but either way, this is a kind of a representative of the fact that Paul is loosening up a little bit.
Sure. Oh, but it still seems like a really horrible idea.
Yeah.
To just do this indoors in this tiny little room.
So we go back to the school year. Teddy is burned.
Yeah, all the kids come back, right?
Yes.
So we start the next semester. The new gym is open, and the kids are playing basketball in it. Jason came back. His hair's cut, so his dad won. Mm-hmm. He gave in and got his hair cut. Mary's back to berating the kitchen staff. This woman put too much paprika in a dish, so she's yelling at them. And yeah, so Coons has his whole entire face burned from skiing, and Tully thinks that's pretty funny that, he maybe didn't have the best trip because he's in a lot of pain.
And so Paul's going to have a pop quiz.
On Chapter 6 that they had to learn on their own.
And then a retake of the midterm exam. So
right.
he's going back on his taking back the whole exam thing.
Right, and he's going to let them redo it. But they all kind of grow. No one seems happy. Like, they don't even know that they were just given a gift.
Right.
That's how privileged these kids are.
Mm-hmm. Paul is summoned by the headmaster, by Mrs. Crane, and he passes by Angus, who looks extremely unhappy.
Yeah.
Because his parents are there.
His mom and stepdad.
Right.
Stanley Clotfelder, who is played by Tate Donovan.
Yes, I know him.
He is in 12 episodes of the MacGyver revival.
Okay.
And he plays Disney's Hercules.
Okay.
In the film, the Hercules series, and in all the Kingdom Hearts games. He's
Gotcha.
Hercules. He also was in 6 episodes of Man in the High Castle. Which
Okay.
I know we've talked about that a few times.
Yes, we have. Yeah, so his parents, well, his mom and his stepdad are here because they're upset that Angus ended up visiting his father.
Right, and the reason they found out is because of this snow globe. So...
Right.
We didn't know this back at the time, but back at Miss Crane's party, he stole the snow globe. And
Right.
we also didn't see, but when he was visiting his dad, he gave his dad the snow globe. They hid those scenes from us.
Right.
But he gave his dad the snow globe, apparently, and Dad gets upset, wants to go home because he doesn't even know he's divorced.
Right.
Because Mom did all of this behind his back after he was institutionalized.
So I kind of find it hard to sympathize with the parents here.
Oh, no, they are terrible people.
Yeah.
She locked Dad away,
Yeah.
divorced him, remarried, and now is trying to lock Tully away because he reminds him of her husband.
Right.
Which is just a horrible, horrible way to deal with the fact that your loved one is having a mental breakdown.
Right. So Angus talks to Mary, and like we cut away from Paul and the parents.
Yeah,
and the
because
headmaster.
Lydia went and brought Mary
Right.
back too, because she knows how much close they all bonded during this. She gets it.
So Angus thinks he's about to be expelled, which means military school for him.
And Mary knows what that means.
Right.
So she holds his hand.
Yeah, they don't say anything. She doesn't say anything. She just holds his hand. And so that's exactly what they're discussing, Paul and the parents and
Right.
the headmaster.
So the parents want to send him to that military school that he's been worried about the whole movie. Because he stole the snow globe and gave it to Tully's dad, and his dad tried beating up an orderly with it, and now he's getting kicked out of the hospital, and they have to find a new place to put him.
And I could care less. But basically, they think that Tully tricked Paul into going.
Right. He says, he just wants to know, how did he manipulate you, or did he slip the leash? And so Paul's not in trouble.
Right.
Paul brought him there on a field trip. They believe that. They went to the museum. All cool. And they just want information from him on how much trouble Tully is in.
And all Paul has to do here is blame Tully, and he's in the clear. But he decides to fall on his sword, saying that the entire thing was his idea, that he was the one that suggested that they go and see his father.
And he insisted on it.
Yeah, and he doesn't give a crap about the consequences that resulted from this. Paul defends Angus, saying it would be devastating if they pulled him out now, that he's a really smart kid. And basically we cut away, and on the way out the door, he calls his boss, that he's known since he was a kid, penis cancer, which is a nice little final insult there. Paul looks at Angus and Mary and takes a long beat of just looking at them, and he emotionally points to his right eye and says, "This is the one you should look at," and then he walks away.
And Tully is now summoned into the office to learn his fate.
Yes, which is that he is not going to be expelled because Paul is being fired instead.
Right.
So Paul packs up his apartment. Mary stops by, and they end up talking about Syracuse. That's where he thinks he's going.
Or he's going to stash stuff at Syracuse, but he doesn't know what he's going to do next. He thinks maybe he'll finally go to Carthage and write that monograph.
Yes.
Is that what it's called?
Which speaking of which, she has a book with blank pages.
A notebook for him
Yes.
to put the notes in so he can finally write this book that he wants to write and finally do all the things he dreamt about doing in his life, but never did because he was stuck at Barton.
Mm-hmm. So really, you get the sense that this is actually a good thing for him.
Right. Even though he get fired, this is good for him because he's going to finally move on and live his life.
She reveals that his sister's kid's name, if it's a boy, his middle name is going to be Curtis.
And that she's going to stay here and keep working because she's raising money to send her sister's baby to college. I don't know if we even mentioned that before, that the sister's pregnant.
Right.
And when she went to visit, she brought her son's baby belongings to pass on.
So meanwhile, the kids in the courtyard are speculating about what exactly happened to Paul. And of course, Tully knows the answer to this. Tully ends up going to talk to him. He thanks him for what he did. And Paul says all he did was tell the truth. And Tully says, like a Barton man. Angus suggests that he can skip his class and he can go and get a beer together. One last time trying to get a beer with him. And of course, Paul says no. Tells him to keep his head up and that he can do this. And Angus emotionally says he was about to say the same thing to him.
Yeah, so they give an emotional goodbye, wishing each other encouragement. And then Tully's just like, I'll see ya, and walks away.
Right.
Of course, they're never going to see each other again. It's 1970. They don't have social media.
Yeah, they can't friend each other on Facebook. So they shake hands, and Angus ends up running off. And then off Paul drives, and then he spits on
Okay,
something.
so this is what happens in that last scene. He starts driving away, and as he's leaving the school, he pulls out this bottle. Again, alcoholic. Pulls out this bottle, but it is Remy Martin cognac, which he stole from Woodruff's office. We saw it at the beginning of the film, and I didn't know what this was about. I had to look up. I was like, what was that ending about? I know it's about something. So I looked it up, and I was like, oh, okay. So at the beginning of the movie, we saw that bottle in the office, and it was mentioned that like the school board or a donor or somebody gave it. It's worth thousands of dollars. It's a very expensive alcohol. So he stole it from the boss's office when he got fired, and it's super expensive alcohol, and he takes a swig of it and then spits it out on the edge of the property as his last, like,
act of defiance.
Exactly. Act of defiance, kind of a screw you to the school for firing him, right? Even though he's moving on to bigger and better things. He's just like, I'm leaving this behind, and I don't value this alcohol. It's no different to me than what I want my $2 bottle of alcohol, and that's better than this cognac that costs thousands of dollars, and you guys can keep it, and your your whole philosophy of privilege.
And that is where the movie ends. And there's one thing I want to bring back up, because I don't think we did it when we had to restart this.
Okay.
You brought up something about David Hemmingson, the writer. You brought up the fact that this mirrors his own background.
Yeah, so the film is fictional, like the characters are fictional, but he actually did go to a private school in Massachusetts, and I think it was in Massachusetts, somewhere in New England, and so like the whole setting was based on his life, and kind of something about his parents were divorced, and not direct storylines weren't about his life, but like he pulled from that when he was talking about like feelings of separation and being abandoned and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was reasonably certain that we didn't talk about that again.
I don't know.
I don't think we did. I think we glanced over that, and I thought it was worth bringing up again. So yeah, that is that.
I have a few more uncredited listings that I don't know where exactly. Most of them are Barton things, so it could have been at the beginning or at the end. There's a photographer played by Tom Bletsis, a Barton father played by Peter Brownlee, Barton parent played by Kevin DeGrow, a Barton student played by Matt DeVito, Barton boy played by Addison Finkler, Academy professor played by Ian Dillon Hunt, crew team member by Cameron Misilowitz, that's probably wrong, sorry, a parent played by Ann Reardon, and a Barton student, James Solapaulos. And I apologize if I get all the names wrong as usual, but I tried.
Yes, that is the important part.
That was a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I did manage to get all of the credited people out of the way. So, yeah, that was the movie.
Yeah, and it was a very good film.
It's very good. I enjoyed it. It's so funny, like, doing this, because I go from, in 1 week, never seen something before, to having seen it, to diving into it so deeply that I feel, like, intimately connected to it, you know? Yeah. Where I know every person that spoke a line in this film, and the nuances of how that's all related.
Yeah.
And it's such a strange thing that we do.
Yes. And it's funny because, like, even, just having these conversations, there's even things that I realize about the film that I did not realize before talking to you.
Right.
And
diving deep like we do.
Yeah, and gaining an even deeper appreciation of whatever we're covering.
Now, watching the trailer for this film, it felt like it was more comedy.
Yeah,
like the trailer was light and like, look, this is fun. They spend the summer break or the winter break together, and then the movie's like really heavy.
Yeah,
it's like a really heavy drama.
It's funny, if I had just based it off the trailer, I'm not totally sure that I would have gone and seen it. But I knew it was Alexander Payne behind it, and I'm a big fan of him. I enjoy all of his movies. So that's one of the chief reasons that I actually went and saw it. I mean,
there definitely are comedic moments.
Yes, but it doesn't dominate the film.
It's really like a heavy like story. But it is beautiful. It's a great film. And I'm glad we watched it.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have anything else to say before we're moving on?
I think that my 12 pages of notes was enough.
Okay. And we're probably like, what, 2 hours at this point?
I'm srecorded to look.
All right. We would like to hear from you. And by the way, if you comment on this video, we're recording this way in advance, so we're not going to be able to shout you out in the next Christmas movie. But we will do if there's comments, we will do some kind of video.
Yeah, comment on all of our holiday content, and then we will round back up and discuss those comments at the end of the month.
Yeah, there we go. All right, Stacie, we reached out.
I can be reached on Twitter, X, Instagram, and Threads at TVN Coupon Talk.
If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join one of my Core Productions Facebook pages. You can buy something from the Core Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee. You can join the Core Productions membership for 99 cents a month. You can hit the bell so that you get notified when new content drops. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to our channel. This is Dave and Stacie from Core Productions, signing off.